dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle. And let's begin exploring the wine glass. In celebration of Cabernet Franc Day, I had the pleasure of sitting down with four incredible winemakers who share a deep passion for this remarkable grape. In this special episode, we dive into the heart of Cabernet Franc, exploring its unique qualities, the ups and downs of growing it in the vineyard, and the challenges and joys of turning it into the beautiful wines we enjoy. Whether you're already a Cab Franc fan or curious to learn more, this conversation is packed with insights and enthusiasm that will leave you reaching for a glass. So grab a seat, pour yourself some Cabernet Franc, and join us for this inspiring celebration of one of the most versatile and captivating varieties in the world of wine. While you're listening, it would be greatly appreciated if you could take 1 minute to subscribe, rate, and review. It only takes a few seconds of your time, but means so much to the show. Please make sure you have that box checked for automatic downloads so that new episodes of Exploring the Wine Glass show up in your next up feed. Don't forget to tell your wine-loving friends about Exploring the Wine Glass. Follow me on the socials and head over to exploringthewineglass.com to read the blog, sign up for the newsletter, and keep up on all happenings. Sláinte!
Give me the wine. Oh yeah.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, Spanish wine scholar, sommelier service, champagne and Côte d'Aron specialist, and a WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials, as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. Stay in the know about all things wine by visiting my website, exploringthewineglass.com. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass. Hello, everybody, and happy Cab Franc Day. Yes, the best day of the year. I might be a little prejudiced, but honestly, Cab Franc is the best grape out there. The variety is kind of an old soul. He's got a lot of children that people don't really, know about. And he's been very active in blends. But what Cab Franc Day is all about is about it being more than a blending grape. That Cab Franc as its own should be a single varietal wine, and it's just a beautiful expression of a grape. So for those of you who do not know the kind of history of Cab Franc Day, Michael, my husband, and myself of Dracaena Wines, we started Cab Franc Day back in 2015 when we released our first Cabernet Franc, which was our 2013. We recognized that there was a wine holiday for every dang grape out there, but there was not one for our beloved Cab Franc. So we decided to start it. And I don't know how, I don't know what I did, but somehow it trended second on Twitter, and it is now an internationally recognized wine holiday. And I cannot be more proud of this wine holiday. And as the years have gone by, there's more and more single varietal Cabernet Francs out there, and just more Cab Franc love. So thank you to everybody, all of the producers who make a single varietal Cab Franc, and to all of the consumers who love Cab Franc and go out and research to find their new next favorite Cab Franc. So thank you, and happy Cab Franc Day. Today on the round table, we have Brecken Estate from Paso Robles. So we have Alex Kemp. So welcome, Alex. We have Caitlin Pianetta from Pianetta Winery. We have Michael Budd, disclosure, husband, from Dracaena Wines. And we have David Stannard from Paradise Rescue, all the way from Bordeaux, which I don't know what time it is there, but thank you for joining us because it's not 6 o'clock at night. And hopefully joining us a little bit later will will be Bill Lapp from Midpoint Winery. So let's get it started. I'm going to start off with Alex. Let's talk a little bit about your Cab Franc and the terroir influence. So, how does Brecon Estates Vineyard, because it is a very special vineyard, which I hope you explain a bit about, how does the vineyard location in Paso influence the flavor, profile, and structure of your Cabernet Franc?
We do have a very special vineyard. It's one of my favorite vineyards, no bias in Paso Robles. We have the oldest Cab Franc plantings in Paso Robles, planted in 1982. As far as we know, we're not completely sure. Planted by Art Norman of Norman Estates back then. That vineyard, that winery lasted a couple decades before Brecon took it over. So a lot of the history kind of got lost with the family. We're unsure of the clone as well. So it's a bit of a mysterious clone, like the wine itself. Lots of layers to the wine, but with those old vines, you get a lot more complex flavor development with the wine. And we're on a calcareous slope as well. So with calcareous soils, it brings a lot more attention and acidity to Cab Franc. I think a lot of the best Cab Francs in the world are planted to calcareous or limestone-based soils. I think that really helps with the wine, helps brighten it up, gives it some liveliness. We're also planted by 12 by 6 spacing, so it's pretty wide. That was more old school in California's day to help with dry farming. But it's helped this vineyard last that long. I think it's really helped the vine survive because they've had a lot of root space to really grow their roots. Maybe a little too much root space at 12 by 6 spacing, but it gets the job done and they're still living. The trellis system is a bit old as well. It's kind of a hybrid VSP California sprawl. We let some of the vines sprawl on the south-facing side. So we have a southern-facing exposure. To protect the fruit, we let some of the vines, every couple vines, drop their shoots over the fruit to help protect the fruit and maintain the integrity of the berries without having them raisin in really warm years, like the 2022 Cab Franc that we have sent to you, Lori.
Yeah.
But in years like that, it really helps our vineyard because we have a pretty cool site, cool weather, maritime influence. It's one of the latest vineyards to harvest off of in Paso Robles. So we get a really long hang time. But with a year like 2022, we're harvesting in October rather than November and not working into Thanksgiving. So grateful for harvests like that.
Yeah, last year, the year before, you guys were like past Thanksgiving, weren't you?
It was rough. Yeah, it was rough. We're pressing off in January. But some of that's our own fault though. We do a bit of extended maceration with Cabernet. So which brings me back to winemaking. Fermentation is typically just punch downs, 2 a day on this, sometimes 3 in the peak of fermentation. And we do about 3 weeks maceration on skins. And we started experimenting with cold soaks around this vintage as well. And I think that's really helped develop a lot of the more flavors. The great thing with older vines is because the fruit doesn't have as much phenolics like color and tannin and crazy power. You can let it rest on skins and go extended maceration or cold soak it and extract as much as you can out of it without worrying about extracting too much tannin. So that's one of the benefits of an older vineyard that we really enjoy. And then we age this for about 20 months in a mixture of 60-gallon barrels, but we also use some 70-gallon barrels to help preserve freshness in the wine. And about 30% of this is new oak.
And Caitlin from Pianetto Winery, also in Paso. We are Paso overloaded today, which I absolutely love. So your Cab Franc is from the Lockwood Valley Vineyard in the San Miguel AVA. So how do you feel those vineyards terroir influences your wine's character?
Vineyard is actually not our estate vineyard. And this one is actually not in Samuel, it is in Lockwood,
Oh, okay.
Bird Valley Vineyards. And so I thought I like
There you go. Visuals.
visuals. So Lockwood Valley is down in this section here. So if you're familiar with Lake Nacimiento and Lake San Antonio, this vineyard is just north of them. And I would say our state vineyard is actually in Monterey County as well, but it is so different than what people think Monterey County is. I think a lot of people think Monterey County is just about Pinots and Chardonnays, and that's not necessarily the case. Down where Lockwood Valley Vineyards is, oh yeah. And I actually took the opportunity today to open our current release, which is our 2021. And then I just opened our 2020 just to see how it's aging. I actually just started making Cab Franc in 2018. So it's relatively new for us, but it's been the same vineyard every single time. But that region, that Lockwood Valley, San Antonio region, it gets the heat that Paso gets, but they have a little bit more of a coastal influence. And like I said, this is a new grape for me to work with. But the age of the vines, it's probably 35 or 40 years old. It is so consistent, very little manipulation you have to do. I mean, there's nothing, it just comes in very healthy. So you really just kind of help it through the winery and the winemaking process. I've never, knock on wood, had a problem with making the Cab Franc. That being said, different flavors are going to come from like a warmer climate. I mean, there's cool in the morning, there's fog in the morning. It's much closer to the coast than the Paso regions, but at the same time, you do get the heat from being in that southern Monterey County area. So it's very consistent vineyard. So I'm just tasting the two side by side, and it's really amazing. I mean, it's just like everyone says, like some of the herbaceous, like everything kind of just concentrates and the tannins mellow out. It's really a neat thing to do side by side from the same vineyard. But we kind of hunt vineyards instead of varieties. So that's kind of how it became upon this. We make a Sangiovese from the vineyard, and I can't remember what year it was. I think there was it was the year where there were some varieties that came in early. It must have been 2018 or 17. And it's like some varieties came in early, and then you had about 6 weeks before the next one. And so you're out checking vineyards and talking to the farmers and being like, oh, I've always wanted to play with Cab Franc. And he's like, by the way, I have a few acres. Oh, funny. And then we've been making it ever since.
That's what it's always about. You find that vineyard that has just a few extra tons, and then it's downhill from there. You're just addicted.
There's just not you don't really find a lot of Cab Franc vineyards, especially like well-groomed, or like this particular vineyard only has, I mean, it's 3 rows, it's probably 2 acres worth of grapes. And it's also like Alex was saying, it's on a very old trellis system, but it is a very low producing vine. So if I was to show you pictures of it, I mean, if it was planted next to, some Syrah, some Merlot, those vines are going to be just huge. And then you see these Cab Franc vines, and you're like, are there any leaves there? Like structure and looking vineyard, but the quality. I have the different tech sheets in front of me, and it's such a stable grape year after year. But it's amazing to work with, and you get little minor changes between vintages, but it's very consistent. It's a wonderful vineyard, and the wine that comes from it. We had never made 100% Cab Franc, And it's been a lot of fun to work with. And so hopefully we'll be doing some blending with it this next year. But other than that, we've just been making 100% Cab Franc.
Well, we like the 100% anyway. We like that much better. And actually, Caitlin, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this name, Tabernaud, is actually drinking a 21 Pianetta Cab Franc tonight. So I don't know who that is, but they're drinking a 21 Pianetta Cab Franc. And they did ask where the name came from, and it is I explained it's your last name.
We're not creative, but we're Italian, so that's the only thing we can.
All right. So, Michael, with Dracaena Wines, honestly, Dracaena Wines we are known for our dedication to Cabernet Franc. So can you explain what inspired the singular focus and how has it shaped the identity of the winery?
I guess when I think back to drinking wine and tasting wine, it was all about varietals and learning and those kind of things, and just keep tasting and just keep developing your palate. We were on a phase like everybody else in the 80s of drinking Zinfandels that were all 16, 17, 18% made by Helen Turley, and essentially developing a headache in a bottle, and then stumbling upon Syrah and things about Syrah, and then an experience with Cab Franc that kind of blew us away in a winery in Napa, and never knowing anything about it, and even on a source of trying to go find it and experience more of it, really led us down that path to say when we wanted to do something different and start the winery, there was no reason to not do Cab Franc, to be different than anybody else that was out in the world.
Yeah. So we just fell in love with the grape. It was a big aha moment of tasting it and really not knowing what Cab Franc was and being the scientist going down the rabbit hole of exploring what it is and just falling in love with it. Dave,
I think it's one of those grape varieties that takes on the soils and the environment that it's grown in, much better than others. And I think I kind of look at it as it pushes back on winemakers a bit. It kind of wants to be its own thing. Winemakers can manipulate it a bit, but if the vineyard is just going to express itself, you've got no choice. To me, it's the antithesis of Chardonnay.
All right. And David, from Paradise Rescued. So all the way from Bordeaux, or where are you today?
I'm currently in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, okay.
Quiet part of the season, I come down here, and it's a good place to market and sell Cabernet Franc.
There you go. And I remember our very first year of starting Cab Franc. I think you were the first person who DM'd me or emailed me or whatever it was way back then to saying, yes, Cab Franc needs its own day and what can we do? So you have been with me along this entire trip of, I can't believe it's been 9 years already. So
indeed. Yep.
Yeah.
David, we're actually not in Cab Franc Day. It's tomorrow for him.
Yeah, we're on the 5th already here.
Yeah.
17 hours ahead, so that's okay. Nobody's getting it.
So Paradise Rescue has emphasizes organic and sustainable viticulture. So how does this commitment influence the expression of Cabernet Franc in your wines?
Look, it's always an interesting journey, Laurie. Ours, the whole Paradise Rescued is a series of little experiments and learnings, several mistakes and several wonderful findings. Cabernet Franc in itself was a wonderful opportunity, and particularly when we purchased the vineyard initially, and the whole of our project is based on a sustainability basis of protecting the heritage of our little village, and the vineyard's overlooked by a 12th century church. So it's kind of real cute, but very important in what we're doing. And it was only about a week or two before we actually signed the final documentation to purchase this particular vineyard block, which is only about half a hectare. That's 1.5 acres. That we actually found out that it was Cabernet Franc. So, given that we didn't have any other vineyards, that was the foundation vineyard. Guess what we did? We got started in 2010, and we made a pure Cabernet Franc. And to our wonderful surprise, it tasted very good. I would just say that it tastes a hell of a lot better now that we know what we're doing. But part of that journey was starting cold turkey with organic viticulture. And certainly part of that has been through the development of the soil, which has led us through our own internal analysis to work out how important the soil was. And it should be important for all of us, really, when you think about it. It's a plant, you stick it in the ground. And we put a lot of time as viticultural people into looking at the plant, but less time into looking at the soil. And to me, that's been an error. And that's one that we're slowly addressing. And funny enough, like I look at it this year in our vineyard, we sort of not quite 50-50, but we are Bordeaux, so you bow and scrape to Merlot a lot, and we make a Merlot Cabernet Franc blend, and that's what the right-hand side of Bordeaux does fairly well. And I have to say, Merlot, although being one of Cabernet Franc's children, that one should have been put out in a different parking lot. Before it went commercial. It is quite a difficult variety to be growing in Bordeaux at the moment. And the Cabernet Franc didn't get the effort it should have done this year. And I was the vigneron. Resources were horribly tight for a whole series of reasons. But yeah, at the end of it all, Cabernet Franc just comes screaming through. And everybody who's walked into our little winery over the last number of months and has a sip of that sort of melts and wanders off and makes nice comments. So that's fantastic. But yeah, look, the key to it has been for us, I think, working consistently on organics, taking that to a higher level, and now thinking and working more and more on the regenerative side of our agriculture and viticulture.
And before we go into some more questions for the winemakers, I do want to introduce Allison. She is here. She's Cab Franc Chronicles, and I absolutely love her. And if you are not following Allison on Cab Franc Chronicles, you absolutely should. I mean, her name says it all. So that's all you just need to know. Just her name says it all. So welcome, Allison. And I'm always happy to see you. Always happy to see you. All right, back to Alex. Although you guys do your 100% Cabernet Franc, you guys are also well known for your blends. And so, although we don't really want to talk about the blending because Cab Franc is more than a blending grape, what do you think that Cabernet Franc adds to the blends? And when you are blending, what's in your back brain of why you're putting in your Cabernet Franc?
Cabernet Franc's always for complexity, really. I think with Cabernet Franc, you get the fruit of a Cabernet Sauvignon, but you also get typically a little more herbaceousness, dried herbs, more chaparral notes. So it really adds to the complexity of the aromatics. I think for us, our vineyard's a little different, but it gives a slightly more juicy characteristic to blends. But I do have to stop you on the 100% Cab Franc. We do cheat a little bit. We're about 96% Cab Franc on this.
We'll allow that. We'll allow that.
Just a little bit. They're old vines, so they need just a touch of, there's a little Tannat in there for structure, a little heavier tannin.
Nice.
A little Malbec to darken up the color a little bit, give it a little more roundness. But Cabernet Franc, typically we don't like to blend with it though. We like to make it on its own because we love it so much. It's really our favorite wine at Brecken. I think it's the staff's favorite and a lot of our wine club's favorite wine.
It's I know that when I come visit you guys, there's always a lot of Cab Franc out there. People are really excited when they see it. That, and I'll give you your Albarino. We're going to skip over it, but I can't not mention the Albarino. right. Caitlin, can you explain your aging process for Cabernet Franc and how do you feel the aging potential for Cab Franc? Because so many people just think Cab Franc, drink now or in a couple of years, and we're going to lay down its son Cabernet Sauvignon for years. So, what do you think? What is your aging potential, and what is your aging process? What do you think it does?
Interesting that you've mentioned that with the progeny of. It seems like Cab Franc got around a little bit.
He certainly
Correct.
did. He
But-
certainly did.
We did an article about Cab Franc, I don't know, a couple months. This is last year, sometime this, I don't even know. I feel like it's still July, so I don't even know what day it is. But it makes me laugh that Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc are the parents of Cab Sauv, which is the wine to lay down. And then before we did this seminar, I kind of was doing some more research on it, and it's just fascinating, some of the things that they have actually measured in each of the varieties, which is neither here nor there. But I do, like I said, we by happenstance kind of got into Cab Franc. Our first vintage was 2018. As far as ageability, I just opened a 2020 for this evening, and then I'm tasting against a 21. I have not opened an 18, but that's probably going to be on my to-do list for this weekend. But it's just it's been a surprise. We are kind of growers who make wine, so like I said, when it comes into the winery, it is one of the most stable grapes I've ever seen, which is interesting as far as the chemistry of the grape itself. But our aging, we do 20, anywhere from 18 to 22 months in the barrel. And so the 2020 that I'm tasting right now, I had 18 months in the barrel. The 21 I'm tasting had about 22 months. There is a big difference. It softens. Some of those herbaceous notes that are very bright, that some people kind of find a little strong or off-putting, soften up very quickly within the first year or two, is what it seems like. But it's not overpowering. It's ages very well, I think. Longevity-wise, I'm out of my element. I'm going to default to you on this one because 2018 is the peak of my work with Cabernet Sauvignon or Cab Franc. But from what I've seen so far, the 2020 that I'm having this evening has miles on it. It still has a lot of time that you're going to be able to enjoy it. But we do very little manipulation in the winery, and then we age in typically French, Hungarian, and sometimes Russian, and a little bit of American oak. This particular wine is I think we have some neutral wood on it. That's Hungarian oak. Then everything else is kind of a new French, so it's probably a 60-40 percentage on that one. But I don't know. I mean, I hope I answered that question properly. But
Yes, I think you answered it fine. And I will relegate you asking that to Michael, because Michael, we just tasted some of our original wines. So what is your thought on the aging potential of Cabernet Franc?
Yeah, so proper storage, of course. But we just tasted through our 13, 14, and 15, and amazingly enough, they're still in their primary phase. The 14 is bricking just ever so slightly, and I think that was related to the vintage. The acids in that wine of that year were lighter for us, but the 13 and 15 are still perfect, jammy, raspberry, tobacco, leather, all of those kind of things. It's not going into secondary or tertiary phases at all, which personally I was shocked. first wine out of the gate, it's like, wow, okay, this is 11 years old. Amazing.
Yeah, so it definitely has the potential to age. I think people think about it as not as age-worthy as Cabernet Sauvignon because of those tannins and the acid level that's in there. But Alex is shaking his head. He's like,
Well,
but it can
I think
definitely
Cabernet
age.
Franc is more age-worthy.
Yeah.
I think it has a little more attention to it that helps it go the distance. It usually is planted on calcareous or limestone-based soils. That may be why, I don't know, but with the acid and the tension to the wine, I think they hold on longer than a lot of cabs, especially with how Cabernet Sauvignons are made these days. A lot of them are made way bigger and richer, and I think they might be fighting words, but I think they fall apart a little earlier when you get those bigger Cabernets. And I think Cabernet Franc, it's a little harder to make a bigger, robust wine out of Cab Franc. Like Michael said, the terroir is going to show through, and it kind of guides you on how it wants to be made.
Yeah. And I think your statement right there was the absolute truth. A lot of it is how the winemaking style of the wine. And I agree. Those bigger, bolder cab sauves, the cab and the slabs, they're not age worthy because of how they're made. So it is kind of like a difficult question to answer because it is dependent on the winemaking of that style of that wine. So excellent, Alex. And then we have a question from Mary. She would like to know, are the winemakers seeing the price of Cab Franc grapes increasing? So over the years, have we seen the increase in price? Is it relatively steady? I mean, everything I think increases every year, but is it?
Alex's estate.
Yeah, we are sourcing a little bit. We are sourcing a little bit, but all fruits going up in price, mainly because of inflation and growth of our region. But I would say with the more luxury vineyards in Paso, there's a few that are starting to plant more Cab Franc in place of Cabernet Sauvignon, and therefore seeing a little more price increase to them because there's starting to be quite a demand, I think, for the variety. And there's just not much planted in Paso, so people need to find it somewhere.
I'm curious what David's seeing in Europe.
Yeah, look, Mike, it's a really different game, to be honest, because I have no feel at all on what the traded market would be for grapes that are produced by a third party. Very much more certainly around us, and our model is that everything is grown by the producer, so you're completely integrated. Therefore, there isn't a price for the fruit. There's only a price for the wine. And across a lot of Europe at the moment, that's not a pretty price unless you are still in one of those top echelons. And even they have taken a good haircut in 2023 and 24.
So I did read an article. I don't have the exact numbers, but what they were saying is, like Alex said, all prices are kind of going up, but the rate that Cabernet Franc has jumped up is higher than the rate that Cabernet Sauvignon has jumped up. So it's, they're all going up, but Cabernet Franc has made a larger jump than its son, Cabernet Sauvignon. Maybe we're making too big of a splash with Cab Franc Day. I don't know. All right. So, Michael, back to you and Cabernet Franc. How do you see it evolving, and how do you see Dracaena Wines as playing a role in that transformation? And then I've got to, in involving in that transformation, my beloved Blanc de Franc. So how do we see that as evolving for Cabernet Franc? And now, a word from our sponsor. Looking for a unique wine tasting experience? Look no further than Dracaena Wines' tasting room in downtown Paso Robles. Located on the corner of 13th and Pine, this charming spot is not your average winery. founded by passionate wine lovers who also happen to be the brains behind Cab Franc Day, Dracaena Wines is proud to call themselves home of Blanc de Franc. This crisp and elegant white wine has gained a cult following and is just one example of their superb offerings. With over 10 years of consistently receiving 90+ ratings from top critics, these wines are sure to impress even the most discerning palates. So come raise a glass with us and celebrate great wines at Dracaena Wines' tasting room.
I think Cabernet Franc is just, as a varietal, it's becoming more mainstream. When I think about all of the wines that were created, Alex talked about earlier around, Cab Franc being a centerpiece. But I think Cab Franc now is much more often on the front panel. It's no longer, kind of a fanciful name, say, to put on the bottle, because it's more than 75%. So you start to see it showing up more. The more tasting rooms you go into, you kind of start to see it showing up on the tasting menu. It's no longer that special bottle behind the counter that's just for wine club members that kind of taste it. So I think Cab Franc being front and center is helping educate people. I think these kind of events, these Cab Franc Day, the various events that go on that I read about, that you tell me about Cab Franc going on around the world, I just think it's becoming more common. It's not quite Cab Sauv, it's not Sauvignon Blanc, but it is certainly becoming more front and center in the overall wine drinking community of what people want to have. It's no longer, that special occasion wine, that Opus One that might be out there that somebody's sitting on. It's, hey, I'm gonna open a bottle of Cab Franc for Wednesday night,
And
Yeah,
which is tonight.
which is tonight.
I can add into that, Michael. I certainly, down in this corner of the world in Melbourne, no, it's not exactly the great epicenter of the world for wine necessarily, but the response to full variety Cabernet Franc, when I walk in to do a prospect and sale process, it has jumped up dramatically in the last 3-4 years. So I can give you 2 examples just from the last week where I have literally walked into a restaurant come wine bar and started doing a very quick pitch to gauge interest or ask for a glass of wine or something like that. And because Cabernet Franc is our flagship wine and it therefore comes first on the mention list, I've had a couple of reactions like, wow, stop the conversation. When can we taste? Yeah, one pure Cabernet Franc, if you've got some age on it. Certainly just 10 days ago, I walked into a restaurant reasonably close to the city centre here and did that store, and he said, you've got an aged full varietal Cabernet Franc? I said, yeah, I've got probably 3 or 4 that if you want to taste. He said, just send me a carton of the best. No tasting, just send me a carton of your best. What's your price for da-da-da? Job done. He rang me yesterday and said, I've sold that carton. When's my next one coming?
Nice. Very nice.
Clearly needs to go 2x on the price if he sold it that fast.
That's the discussion for later this afternoon, and that will happen.
All right. So I just want to go through some, these are questions that anybody can answer, or we can do round robin type thing. One of the big things about Cabernet Franc is that herbaceousness, those pyrazines, that bell pepper. So like, what is your thought process? Because I think bell pepper is a very determining factor for Cab Franc. There's the pro-pyrazine and there are the anti-pyrazine peoples out there. But a lot of it that characteristic has a lot to do with canopy management, and how those vines are being seen into the sun, which breaks down those pyrazines. So how is your canopy management relate to the yield and to the optimal ripeness and flavor profile for your Cabernet Franc? We can round robin that.
As far as our Cab Franc, it needs a long hang time because it's a cooler site, like I mentioned earlier. And older vines, they need a longer hang time to ripen. But we do want to preserve the integrity of the fruit, so we do let some of those shoots hang over the clusters, and shade is what builds a lot of those pyrazines or green notes. But we don't necessarily shy away from them. I'd say it's every fourth vine we drop the canopy over the fruit. So we're not covering all the fruit in the whole block or the row, but we get a couple vines covered, protect the fruit, and then we do get some of the green notes. But I hate saying green. I don't like talking about green flavors because I feel like as a winemaker in the wine industry, I'm sure as all you know, when someone hears green, they kind of go earmuffs and don't want to talk about the wine. It's automatically bad, but that's what makes Cabernet Franc great. It's why I always lead with herbaceous. That's my buzzword with it. But there's Pinot Noir, Forest Floor, Cabernet Sauvignon as well, the best in the world in my mind. Has herbaceous notes, and I think those herbaceous or green notes adds another layer of complexity to the flavors, and it's not going to be an exceptional world-class wine without that another next level of flavors. And I think because of the pyrazines, if you can manage them correctly, they can add that next level. Whereas if we drop the whole canopy down and covered all the fruit in our vineyard, that's where you go all bell pepper or jalapeno, which is a little over the top and off-putting and hard to pair with food.
Exactly. Anybody else opinions?
I think Laurie goes back also to a certain amount to your terroir. I know it's a factor and a topic that you and I've discussed way back in the past as well. In certainly Bordeaux, which I would not describe as a Californian climate by any sense at all, but you do have an opportunity to ripen the fruit and get a greater level of phenolic ripeness than you would say moving further north to the Loire Valley, or if you go further north again, you hop across to Canada or something like that. I can't help thinking, but that level of ripeness determines the level of the greenness or the bell pepper that you have in there. I observe also around the world that it is very much a North American terminology. It's not something in France that I hear referred to a lot. I've not done the extensive drinking and studying that clearly the guys around this table have. But I'm not a great fan, but that's probably because it's going to be real difficult for us to make a bell pepper taste in what we do in Bordeaux.
Laurie, I would love to chime in with a comment on this if I can.
Absolutely.
In the Loire Valley, which is kind of the ancestral home of Cabernet Franc, it represents a third of the world's Cabernet Franc plantings. The producers there refer to those green undertones in Cabernet Franc as being the noble side of the grape. And I think that's really, really important. The fact that this is the spot that really is the single varietal home for Cabernet Franc, and the fact that they celebrate those herbaceous undertones and they think of them on a spectrum of, it can range from herbal to foresty to everything in between. For me, they need to be there. Otherwise, it's not Cabernet Franc. It's just a question of if it's in balance. So for me, that's something that I always look for when I'm tasting Cabernet Franc is where is the green coming from and what is it? And is it in balance with everything else in the wine? And I think that's super important.
That is absolutely the most important thing. I agree with you, Alison. It's the balance. It's the balance. If the first thing you're getting into your face is a bell pepper and that's all you can get, then it is out of balance. And yeah, I absolutely agree.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say, I completely agree 100% with that. And you'll have, if you're dealing with the same vineyard, you're going to have vintage to vintage differences. But there's a huge difference to me between appropriate, like herbaceous, or there is a line where it goes into vegetal, like a bad influence versus something that is a positive aromatic component of the wine. But I will say over time, if it is an imbalanced wine, all that's going to happen is those imperfections and those like negative, from what I've seen with Cab Franc, maybe when it first gets released or bottled or whatever, yes, it's very strong, there's herbaceous notes, but it softens. And that's something that over time, like I think bottle aging definitely helps 100% Cab Franc. I have never blended Cab Franc before, so I'm not as familiar with that, but it is definitely a site specific thing, and you'll know right away if it's a negative vegetal component or a positive or complex. It just has, it's a very dynamic wine is the best way I could put it. But I completely agree because it's very site specific, and you can get phenomenal Cab Franc from a lot of different areas. So it's hard to say. I don't know. But.
Yeah, and they all are their own entity and great in different ways. So like you can appreciate the Cabernet Franc from one region versus another region versus another region, and they all can be exceptional Cabernet Francs, and they all are completely different. But there's that single kind of thread that goes through, and I think that's what you're talking about, Allison, is like that's the thread that pulls at Cab Franc, that is what Cab Franc is. So I agree. What about issues with Cabernet Franc? Do we have any, early bud ripening issues or late ripening, bud break issues or late ripening issues that we need to be concerned with? Now, the bulk of us are in Paso, so we all have the same weather. But are there things that we're concerned with in terms of Mother Nature and Cabernet Franc?
For us, a lot of the Bordeaux varieties, because Paso is a little bit of a warmer climate, and we get those heat spikes where it can be over 100 degrees for a week or two. Mm-hmm. Shriveling of the fruit is something we try to avoid. We want to protect that fruit as much as we can. I think Cabernet Franc, it's really hard to tell because there's so many factors that go into it, especially just moisture in the soil. But I think it holds up better than Cabernet Sauvignon as a cluster. Sometimes Cabernet Sauvignon is first to sort of dehydrate. But in Paso, it's really about protecting the integrity of the fruit. It may be more of an old vine issue with us, but some years the Cabernet Franc just does not yield what we're hoping for. Yeah. That's why sometimes we go off site to get a little extra Cab Franc, but no.
i.e. 2024?
It's very rare that we.
Maybe. Grapefruit, just not a lot of it.
Yeah, it's also with the new plantings. I think a lot of vineyard managers need to be careful what clones they're putting in the ground. It's hard to find clean cuttings of Cabernet Franc. I'm hoping that the nurseries have done a better job with that, but it has a tendency to attract viruses, and then the vines they're not able to ripen the fruit fully, just a matter of years into planting. So it's something that growers need to look out for.
What are you seeing as being its most susceptible, the viruses that it's susceptible to?
Leaf roll, red blotch mainly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of red blotch as well.
Yeah,
there's like that and Petit Bob, for example. Those two seem to be red blotch seems to be attracted to those two for some reason.
Yep, agreed. That and also I think with the water table dropping up and down around the regions, the salinity in the water table is really hammering some of the vines. We've had some phenomenal great water years in the past couple of years, at least in the state of California. That's really helped increase the water table. When the water table was dropped in 20 and 21, It was just hammering grapevines.
Yeah.
It was just pushing them all with all of that salt.
All that salt in the soil.
It's, you know, I don't know. We've been up here, we've been growing the grapes for, I guess, 25, almost 30 years. I can't remember. I don't know. I'm not good with time. As far as I know, I'm so, but I've never seen a normal year because I don't think that's what we get here. I will say the vineyard that we pulled, my only experience with Cabernet Franc has been this particular vineyard. I love it. I think it's a great vineyard. It's consistent. But like I said, you look at the canopy on this Cab Franc versus the canopy on the Syrah or a Merlot, or I believe at that vineyard they also grow some Chardonnay. It looks like a Dr. Seuss tree, you know, just that. But as far as, and that's why I think Michael's right. It is 100% location specific on the Cab Franc. Now, the characteristics of the Cab Franc are still going to be the same. It's just going to be what aspect of that Cab Franc is going to stand out more. Yes, the climate, the rainfall, all of that stuff has changed everything. But I will say this has been one of the most consistent grapes I've ever worked with. And that's between drought years and rainfall years. And there's no 2 years that are the same in this area, as far as I've seen.
And David, you guys in Bordeaux have had some crazy weather. So what are you seeing in terms of it?
Look, I think one of the most important factors that I've observed as I've reflected over just the 15 years we've been producing is certainly the impact of climate change, and it is certainly warmer in Bordeaux than it was. That said, in out of the last 4 seasons, 3 of them have been, from a perspective of fungal disease, quite horrible. And there's no doubt that brother Merlot or little son Merlot is much more susceptible to all of that than the mum dad Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc is much more resilient to that, and with a certain amount of manual effort can be really steered through relatively happily, even with, you know, a bit of mildew on the leaves and so on. The other factor I notice is it's got warmer, and it creates a significant problem, particularly for Merlot. And for Merlot, it has a very short or narrow ripening window. And in Bordeaux, you've got some problems there, because quite often you've got it's hot. It started earlier in the season. It's probably attracted some frost, which doesn't help it. And then it comes to ripening quickly. So the sugar has shot up, but the phenolic ripeness hasn't arrived. Cabernet Franc has a greater hang time. We don't hang it for that long. It is always a fairly humid type of autumn time, so the risk of rot is always there. What I've noticed, though, is increasingly as the alcohol levels have started rising sort of through 13.5 up to 14%, and you've spent about a bit more time correct. I believe that what we're experimenting with, and I think it is successful, is that if you go and talk to guys who, and Alison would certainly know this well, that if you're in the Loire Valley, they tend to mature their Cabernet Franc 50%, maybe more, maybe less, in stainless steel in vats, and the other half in barrels, in oak barrels, and probably not for more than 12 months. And that helps keep that freshness and lightness. And we're doing that test now. We have a stainless steel barrel, which I can assure you in Bordeaux is reviewed as being absolutely heretical. Monsieur, one doesn't have a stainless steel barrel in a Bordeaux winery. Well, we got one, and I wouldn't mind betting that in a couple of years we'll have another one to put Merlot in as well, because it just allows that fruit in the wine to be better maintained and held on to. And I haven't tasted all the final blends of that, but I have tasted little individual snippets from both oak barrel and from stainless steel barrel. And the difference is incredible after just a few months. Absolutely incredible. So we trying to do that to maintain some of that that wonderful freshness that Cabernet Franc has, and to preserve the obvious expression of the acidity in there, because it is such a fantastic wine when paired with food, and you need some of that acidity in there to go with it. Plus, it allows you also to go into that area which we never talked about previously in Bordeaux, is that if you want an aperitif wine, you've got to have something that's got a bit of freshness with it, and a Cabernet Franc, a slightly chilled 100% varietal Cabernet Franc or Loire Valley, is also absolutely magnificent. It just amplifies all of those beautiful aromas that you get in there, and preserves the freshness on the final palate as well. So that's just the edge that we're putting into it at the moment.
And so we have a question. So each of the winemakers, Cab Franc, one of the things that's fantastic about Cab Franc is its food versatility. So what are one or some of your favorite pairings with your Cabernet Franc? So Alex, how about you go first?
My rule of thumb for a wine is pair it with a food from the region it came from. So Loire Valley or Pass Robles. Because our Cabernet Franc's coming from Paso Robles, I could say something grilled, but that seems like too easy of an answer. But maybe something with a little more umami flavor to it.
Okay.
Say mushrooms, a sort of mushroom risotto. I think a little fattiness to go with the tension of our Cabernet Franc.
Once I started making this wine, my eyes were opened. Because it can go with so many dishes. It's very difficult to choose one. It is so dynamic, and as it ages, I think it becomes even more just layered and depth. The depth of this wine, even though it's like a medium body, it's not like as big as a Cabernet Sauvignon. So I don't throw steak at this wine. I mean, you can if you want. It will hold up to it, but a while ago when my employees tasted it, first she tried it with rosé, but chicken tikka masala. I know it sounds odd, but a little bit of heat, a little bit of the herbaceousness. We either like to do similar flavors or complementary flavors when we do food pairings. And I thought chicken tikka masala would be kind of a great dish, but I know that we're just past Thanksgiving, but that would have been, Cab Franc is one of the best Thanksgiving wines because it goes with everything that's on the table.
Agree. Yeah. It is a Thanksgiving wine. Anything that's on that table, Cab Franc can go with.
And then a lot of pork dishes that are always tricky to pair with. I think this is phenomenal for pork. However you season it, however you cook it, phenomenal wine to go with any kind of a pork dish.
Excellent.
Itself.
Yeah,
Michael?
I agree. I think I put mine in the chat. But I think as a wine, I think it pairs well with just about anything. And I always say if a wine doesn't pair well, just drink a little water between the food and the wine. That helps clear things out. But I put in there an herb crusted smoked chicken. I think it carries some of the elements of not designed to carry barrel influence and those kind of things, but I think some of the herb profile that everybody talked about, that's an influence, a component of Cab Franc, carries it through and pulls it out a little bit if it's not there present. And then that the smokiness kind of like just, I find a little bit of smokiness, let's not call it 2020 smokiness in the state of California. Everybody remembers that. Helps pull out some of the flavors in the wine that makes it really unique.
Yeah, Laurie, I think from my perspective, the advice I always give to customers is that, you can put Cabernet Franc with a hell of a lot of things, but don't be tempted to add too much on the side of rich sauce. So even if you want to start with what I describe as richer fish dishes, so something like grilled salmon is just superb served with Cabernet Franc. I've been surprised in the past, and that people have served things like chilied prawns with it. Again, don't go over the top with the chili. Don't try and kill the prawns and the wine in one go, but that actually goes really well, because we've certainly found that the taste you're left with in the mouth afterwards drinking Cabernet Franc is slightly spicy, and that goes well with that. So yeah, but again, grilled or roasted meats, fantastic. But again, just be careful on the sauce. And if you're going to use a tomato sauce, please switch to Merlot.
Well, I vote for smoked Gouda grilled cheese and butternut squash soup. That
David
is,
Sanders.
yeah. Oh, yes. So I'm going smoked Gouda, grilled cheese, and butternut squash soup. That is my favorite combination. That's really my favorite combination for anything on the face of the earth, but it does go great with Cabernet Franc. So we are at the top of the hour, and I know everybody's time is extremely precious. What I would like to kind of ask, though, before we leave is, one, what have you seen an increase in the demand for Cab Franc? Have more people been coming into your tasting room actually asking for Cab Franc? And then two, how do you approach the education aspect of Cabernet Franc when that person who is not familiar with Cabernet Franc comes into your tasting room? So, David, you want to go first?
Yeah, look, interesting. I'll keep it brief because we are out of time. But look, you don't head to Bordeaux if you're going to hunt Cabernet Franc. Despite Cabernet Franc being in Bordeaux, being the world's second largest vineyard in the world for Cabernet Franc, people are not sufficiently educated enough yet to know that that exists. And there's probably, Alison will have way better figures than I am, but I always estimate and I always talk about there are less than a dozen Cabernet Franc varietals available in Bordeaux. It's probably a bit more than that, but most people still use it as a blend wine, and it does some magical stuff to improve Merlot. But when I get people there and they listen about it, and half the time people are still confused because they've just heard the word Cabernet. We've really got to keep pushing that Cabernet Franc bit, Cab Franc bit, because it's just a great opportunity to keep spreading the message. And those people turn into be quite often long-term customers, because they just love when they found something so beautiful and expressive of wine without it being super heavy, dominated, tannic, or what have you. Great opportunity out there.
Thank you. Caitlin?
As I would say, when we have it on the tasting menu, I think people are apprehensive at first, probably because they've never tasted 100% Cab Franc before. But it is something that I feel there is becoming a little more of a demand of, whether that is because there is not that much acreage planted in California, or if they are actually interested in it. But once they taste it, they can see how much more dynamic it is than Cabernet Sauvignon. And don't get me wrong, that's how we got our vineyard started, was Cab Sauv. But when you start explaining to them a little bit of the history, which I've geeked out on myself, it's really fun to see everyone's reaction. So I would say that not necessarily have I seen a growth in demand, but when we do pour it in the tasting room, people are very open to it. And when you explain to them the origins and everything else, they get very excited about it, because it's just a wine that is not widely expressed, and it should be.
Alex?
Yeah, I think demand for us has steadily been growing because, like I said, the Cabernet Franc, even we believe it's our best wine and most complex wine. Tasters come in asking about it, and wine club members, they love it. So, we've actually planted even more Cab Franc just because we love it so much. Although we do have to blend some of it away, unfortunately. But yeah, I think the demand is there, and I think it's there around Paso Robles as well. My wife's a winemaker as well over at Adelaida, and that's one of their favorite wines and they're growing quite a bit of Cabernet Franc now because they think it holds up better in the heat as well. And as far as new tasters, when they come to taste it, I like to think it's a little more elegant than Cabernet Sauvignon. It depends on winemaking style oftentimes and where it's grown. But I think it's a little more elegant, and it's Cabernet Sauvignon's father, it's got something to it. It's got the genes.
There you go. There you go. It's passed its genes along to some serious grapes, which before we get to Michael, so Cabernet Franc, 5 children, 5 different baby mamas. So he did really get around. 3 here in the United States, 2 that are still in Spain that haven't quite made their way over. Maybe one day they will, but yes, he's passed his genes around quite a bit. And Michael?
Well, I mean, considering we built our foundation on Cab Franc, people come in to look for it. So it makes it a little hard. I know when we don't have it on the tasting menu, it is actually a disappointment for people that are looking for it. So when we were sold out of our 21 and we went 6 months before we could put our 22 on the menu. It was a long 6 months, put it that way.
It was a very long 6 months. Yes. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We had over 50 people register for the webinar. So there is really quite a bit of Cab Franc love out there. And the chat was going on with people talking about where they have had their Cab Franc. And I just want to thank everybody who has producers who are producing it and consumers who are intrigued to learn more about it. Thank you so much. This is truly, this is the grape of my soul. It really is. And I appreciate everybody who helps to promote the grape as more than a blending grape. And I wish everybody a very happy Cab Franc day. Sláinte.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Sweet Merlot, give me the nappy, you know.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoyt-Budd. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com and sign up for my newsletter at exploringthewineglass.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Podcast music is Wine by Kevins. Until next week, sláinte.
Never let you go. No, never let you go. I want a nice glass right now.